Hi, Ken. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today, Alex?
I'm doing great. It's so nice to see you. For everyone watching, my name is Alex. I know you're probably used to seeing Gina on here, but from moving forward, I'm going to start doing the Facebook Lives with Ken. So I'm really excited. And I see that you have a special guest here today as well. Alecia, hi. How are you doing?
Great. So glad to be here today.
Awesome. So, Ken, what are we talking about today?
Well, we're going to pick up on our last conversation. So last week or the week before, I guess it was, we had a conversation about healthcare in retirement, and and what we're not going to talk about today again is we're not talking about Medicare or Medicare supplements. We're not talking about IRMA costs. We're not talking about Part D and Part D premiums. Certainly not talking about Medicaid in retirement. Our conversation today is to take a deeper dive into long term care and care planning strategies. And so that's why we have Alecia here today. She's an expert in that area. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of our conversation, a little bit of a recap from last week, and then and get into more of the nuances of this type of planning. So again, last week I talked a little bit about a client of mine. His name is Bob from Indianapolis, and he was referred to me as a referral from a mutual friend or a client of mine, really. And so he said, right out of the gates, he said, I'm one of those guys that's on the far end of the bell curve. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what does he mean by that? He said, well, my father just passed away, and he was 95. Mom's 90. Okay. My wife's parents are in their 90s, and they're doing great. And they could live to 100 years old. And he was more than ready to begin having a conversation about healthcare and healthcare costs in retirement, with three living parents out of four in their 90s doing well. But I think we all know that at 90, doing well is not like 60 or 65 doing well. There's some things going on. There's some issues and so on. And so he really was very direct, and he said, I don't want to go broke, and I don't want to be a burden to my family. And so that reminded me of a quote by Charles Lindbergh. He said, "Isn't it strange that we talk the least about the things that we care the most about?" And Bob was ready to have that conversation about family. He was ready to have the conversation about the future survival of his loved ones. And so this was a refreshing tea into the conversation about care planning in retirement and what that really means, which is, again, much different than lowering costs of premiums associated with Medicare supplements and Part D and Part B supplements and so on like that. Now, the thing I think that would be helpful to tee things up for today is to just talk about the general issue for a current retiree. All right. So, consider this hypothetical conversation. Here's a situation with someone who's reached retirement, done a great job of getting there. They've climbed the top of the mountain, they've saved, they've got enough money to take care of living expenses, they're enjoying retirement life, and suddenly they experience a chronic illness of some kind, a physical disability, something that requires long term care. Could be at home, could be an assisted care facility, could be in a nursing home. But from that point forward, things have changed. There's a significant need for additional cash flow, enough money to cover those kinds of expenses. And, look, that's an income gap that could go on for the rest of their life. And it's really triggered by common things in many, many cases. Could be diabetes, could be a heart condition, could be Alzheimer's. So I think the issue here really is to begin to have conversations that we typically don't have in many, many cases. I've said, and I'll repeat a couple more times here, we never really get to the right solutions if we're having the wrong kind of conversations. And again, that wrong conversation is how to save in retirement. You've already saved. Cash flow is the next issue, and these costs can be significant. So I've asked a nationally known expert to come on with us today and talk to us about this issue of care planning in retirement. And so let's get into some of that conversation. Her name is Alecia Barnette. She is the Senior Vice President of Care Planning with the Financial Independence Group in Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome, Alecia.
Thanks so much, Ken. So happy to be here.
So, I bring up the issue of Medicaid simply because there's some things going on in government now that I had no idea about until, in recent months. And I understand that the state of Washington has decided that they need to take steps in their own hands to begin to mitigate this cost of Medicaid. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, we're talking about someone who can't afford their care in later stages of life. So can you fill us in what's going on there?
Absolutely, Ken. So if you are a W-2 employee, a long-term care state-funded tax is coming to a state near you. So what do I mean by that? So Washington, as you said, was the first. There are 15 other states that are hopping on board. And I don't know when that legislation might happen. I know California is knocking on the door. New York is close behind. And there are a multitude of other states. But what does that mean? So a long-term care state-funded plan is essentially a tax. So you are paying a tax if you're a W-2 employee to get a $36,500 long-term care plan. So Ken, as you know, it's a lot more expensive than that. It's around $109,000 annually on average for facility care. It's about half the cost for home care and assisted living. But essentially what happened is they gave you a period to opt out. By opting out, you could purchase a private long-term care plan. It was, you had until November of 2021, and then that was it. And unfortunately, a lot of people wanted to opt out. So it was a mess. Carriers could not take on the amount of applications they were receiving. They were receiving thousands of apps a day. So they in turn paused business in the state of Washington. You could no longer submit it. So if you didn't get an application in before they decided to pause, taking applications, then you were out of luck. And that had to be issued prior to December of that year. So again, a lot of people tried to opt out. They couldn't. And then if you do have to pay the tax, there's no income limit. So if you are a high income earner, you could be paying a large portion, and it's 58 cents per $100. And again, it's not paying for much. What it is doing is it's educating people that, hey, there's a problem out there. We probably can't fund it. Medicaid is overwhelmed. So we're making the taxpayers try to help. But then again, there's still, it's like a Band-Aid. You got to rip that Band-Aid off. There's going to be more. You're going to have to pay more than that $36,500 for care. And if you don't need care today, what's it going to cost in 10, 15, 20 years? So just know that it's coming to a state near you. And I think once we see a few, we're going to see a multitude of states hop on board because they know that they can't pay for it. So why not, charge the taxpayers and take a little bit of that burden off the state? So it's a great time to get educated on why you need it. I wouldn't hop on board just because of the tax, but certainly it's a good reason to get familiar with why you need care, how much care costs, and take action, because a lot of these newer states that are looking at legislation aren't going to give you that opt-out period. So they're going to pass that legislation, and once it's passed, and it starts that following January, if you don't have a plan, you can't opt out. So that's why there's a little bit of urgency there to start educating yourself on solutions, and again, why you actually need care in the first place.
Wow, that is a wake-up call. It's so shocking to think that someone who is 18 or 20 or 24 or 30 years old is going to be paying 58 cents for every $100 of earnings they have, directly taken out of their paycheck. before they ever see the paycheck going into the state coffers to, as you said, to put a Band-Aid on a problem. To use a cliche, this is really just the tip of the iceberg. It seems that, this is an indication of how governments are going to attempt, at least, to handle this issue of care planning at later stages of life. Amazing.
Absolutely. It's and again, I think we're going to see many, many, many states follow Washington's lead. So just be prepared.
Well, I think the message here is that develop your own plan, get educated, get an understanding of what these issues are, and then put together plans and strategies that support that. So let's take that dive into that. And we know that the governments are going to take their actions, and I think we have an indication those actions are going to be very, very small in terms of what the overall effect is going to be. So what's a person to do here? There's so many strategies. I know that we have work plans for many of our clients, and it's really a matter of taking a look at the assets that they have and help protect those assets. Because if someone does nothing, in addition to paying this into the program, then they've got their own assets to use. And so that may be a viable strategy, but it may also make sense to leverage those assets into a strategy that has more teeth to it, that has more overall strength. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. There's a couple of different ways to mitigate against the long-term care risk. There's traditional long-term care insurance, which most people have heard of, and there's asset-based long-term care. So I like to use the analogy owning your policy versus renting your policy. So traditional long-term care is like renting your policy. And I like car insurance or homeowners. You pay in a premium. If you need it, it's the cheapest way to buy the most amount of long-term care coverage. However, if you wake up an angel and you never need any care, you're not getting those premiums back. Again, kind of like homeowners and car insurance. If you don't have an accident, they're not going to pay you your premiums back, right? And then furthermore, there's no exit strategy if you change your mind. So it's still, again, it's not a bad solution. It is the cheapest way to buy the most amount of long-term care coverage. But there are alternatives now, like asset-based long-term care, that are going to give you a benefit whether you live, whether you die, or whether you quit. So the government has allowed certain life insurance or annuities to be accessed while alive, tax-free for long-term care benefits. There are several ways you can fund this plan. So like traditional, which is a pay-as-you-go plan, you can use income to fund the plan. You can stroke a check every year. The difference is those premiums are guaranteed. You have a death benefit if you don't use it. And then you've got some cash value if you change your mind. But you're getting, again, that leverage just like the traditional long-term care with more guarantees. Then you have cash or cash equivalent. Let's say you have $100,000 or $200,000 sitting in your checking account or mutual funds or CDs. You can put those into a life insurance policy that's going to give you, 3, 4, or 5 times or unlimited lifetime benefits for long-term care purposes. But again, oh, by the way, if you don't use it, you don't lose it. There is that death benefit associated with the policy. This one's my favorite. The next way to fund a plan is qualified dollars. So IRAs, 401ks, things like that. A lot of us have a disproportionate amount of money in qualified funds. That's the way we save. It's the way we've always been taught to save. Our employers match sometimes. So we have a lot of money in 401ks and IRAs. Well, there's carriers out there, one specifically that will take qualified money directly. You can roll over money. It's repositioning your IRA or your 401k or your retirement funds into an annuity that's going to pay out over 10 years to fund a life policy with long-term care benefits. You're never going to get out of paying Uncle Sam, right, on those qualified dollars, but you're spreading that tax liability out over 10 years. You're turning your taxable dollars into tax-free money for LTC. And you can make it a lifetime benefit, meaning if you needed care for 10 years or 15 years, you're never going to run out of tax-free income to pay for care. And you can put your spouse on there as well and pay for their long-term care benefits. So it's a great way to utilize qualified money. And then last but not least, you can use highly appreciated non-qualified annuities to fund a plan. So after tax dollars, let's say you put in money into an annuity, it's let's say 50,000 and it grows to 100. So Ken, what happens if you take that money out?
Well, you're going to owe some taxes on it.
Exactly. So there's a more tax efficient way to pay for care. So the government in 2006 put in place the Pension Protection Act. It was enacted in 2010, but what it allows you to do is it again allows certain annuities or life insurance to be accessed while alive tax-free. So in that example, if you put in 50, it grows to 100, we can move that money from our right pocket to our left pocket with a 1035 exchange. That's tax-free. You have your tax-deferred growth. But most importantly, what the Pension Protection Act allows us to do is take that $50,000 gain out tax-free for long-term care purposes. And depending on the insurance carrier, it can leverage 2 times. So your 100 could turn into 200 or 300,000 or even a lifetime benefit for long-term care purposes. So again, it's pennies on the dollar leverage, it's tax efficient, and it's going to pay for someone to provide care for you, whether that's in the home, whether that's in an assisted living or nursing home or an adult daycare. So it's going to provide all of those services. But again, a more tax efficient way to do that. And with all of those solutions, if you don't use it, you don't lose it. In that example, if you don't ever need care, that $100,000 annuity or whatever it's grown to will go to your beneficiaries.
Yeah, those are 2 really good options. I mean, in the sense that you've cut out the tax man. First of all, with the qualified money, you can spread that tax bill out over 10 years, which is way more efficient than someone who would just say, well, if I need it, I'll pull the money out of my IRA. Well, now they're going to pull out $60, $70, $80,000 in 1 year and just go to the next brackets and pay higher taxes on that lump sum distribution. Whereas here, they could spread it out over a 10-year period, save all those tax dollars, the difference between the tax dollars, and spread it out, and then have a leverage, which is the other key component here is a dollar can be leveraged to $1, $2, $3 in long-term care. That's an amazing solution. But particularly what I like is the non-qualified solution, because there Uncle Sam gets cut out completely in taxes. What a beautiful law that is. That's one that works in our favor. Really like that solution. Yeah. And I can tell you, I think the vast majority of folks don't know these solutions exist. And if they did know, then this would give them another option. And it reminds me of a quote: if you change the way you see things, the things you see will change. And I see that in this scenario is we're looking at taxable distributions that are converted to tax-free distributions when needed and leveraged instead of just dollar for dollar distributions. So thanks for that. Those are awesome solutions.
Absolutely. And one thing I'll add too, Ken, is most people don't realize that if they don't have a plan, their money is their plan, right? If you haven't allocated something, you've allocated everything. All of these options are just a better way, a more tax efficient way to leverage your money for long-term care services. So again, just as you said, all we're doing is repositioning an asset. It's still an asset on the balance sheet if you don't need it, but you get the pennies on the dollar leveraging when it comes to receiving care.
Great solutions. Love it. Well, that's why we do the show. We want to be able to put this kind of information out there, frame the subject and give the solution and give some idea of what these options look like. So thank you so much for those solutions. Listen, more information, give us a call, 321-454-3623. Love to go over these options with you and how you might go about putting together a strategy for care planning.
Thanks for allowing me to be here, Ken.
You're very welcome. Good to have you. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you both. That was some really great information. You definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things. I was taking notes as we were talking. So we have to talk after this. But thank you guys so much. This was awesome. I hope to talk with you soon, Alecia, as well. And Ken, of course, we will meet again in the next few
We'll-
weeks. So
Yep. We'll see you
yeah.
next week. All right,
Yep,
you
well,
guys.
everyone watching, please make sure to like and share and follow and contact Ken if you have any questions. Well, thank you,
Thank you,
everybody. It was
everyone.
great. Yeah, have a
Have a
good
good day today. Bye for
Bye.
now.